Do you know that the skin is the largest organ of your body? And when you have to replace it, coding for that can be a little bit complex. So today, we're going to take a look at skin graft coding. Hey everyone, I'm Victoria. I'm a medical coder, auditor, educator, national speaker, blogger, YouTuber, and content creator for medical coding. And on my channel, I discuss tips, tricks, and tutorials to help you succeed in your medical coding career. I've done a lot of work in plastic and reconstructive surgery and wound care, so I've seen a fair amount of skin grafts in my time, and they can be difficult to code because the numerical mechanisms and calculations don't follow suit for the different types of skin grafts. So you have to really pay close attention to what kind of graft it is and where you're putting it and the sizing. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's pop open our CPT book and take a look. I feel like you can sometimes tell the difference between an E&M coder and a surgical coder by the way they utilize their CPT book. As someone who's coded a lot of surgeries, when I am looking for a surgery, I don't look in the index. I go to that body area or that chapter of CPT and start looking through the table of contents there to find the right section that I need to be in. But if you're not someone who does a lot of surgeries, you don't know how to utilize the book quite that tactfully sometimes, so you're used to just looking stuff into the index because that's the way you were trained probably when you went through coding school. So our skin surgery codes for the skin grafts go from codes 15002, which is the surgical preparation for the graft, to code 15278. If you're coding for any kind of skin graft procedure, please make sure, as you do with anything that you're coding out of CPT, read through your guidelines and your definitions first to make sure that you're appropriately utilizing the right CPT codes. There's three main types of skin grafts to code for. There's autografts, which are made from your own skin, oftentimes full thickness skin grafts or split thickness skin grafts. What they do is they take a dermatome. If you're not familiar with a dermatome, picture in your mind like a cheese slicer. It's kind of a little bit like that, but for your skin. They often harvest the skin in the back of your thigh because that's where they can usually get a good specimen if the wound is not located on the back of your thigh. The full thickness is a full sheet of your skin. If it is a split thickness, that means they run it through a meshing machine. If you've ever made one of these things as a kid, it's kind of the same premise. We've taken that sheet of tissue and cut it up or meshed it in a certain way so that it now stretches over a longer spot. What happens then is the skin in all of its amazing glory just kind of fills up those spots then in between. If you're ever interested in some more information on the skin and skin procedures, there's a book that I recommend that you can download online for free, and I'll link it in the comments below. It's called Practical Plastic Surgery for Non-Surgeons. It covers skin grafts, pressure ulcers, sores, cleft palates, all of that really important stuff that you want to know, like high-level stuff for people who don't have a clinical background. There's also allografts, which are made from donor or cadaver skin, and then xenografts, which are made from animal skin, typically the skin of a pig. You do have to be careful, and I'm not going to get too much into the JW modifier here, but I do want to touch upon it. When you are billing for xenograft skin from that comes in like a sheet that you purchase from a supplier, oftentimes it comes in a full sheet, and if you are wasting part of that sheet, you have to use that JW modifier to indicate that part of that supply was wasted. Now, the first thing we have to think about when we are coding for our skin graft procedures is the surgical preparation. And this is where I get a little bit different than I think other coders, because I've talked to some of my clinicians and they've told me point blank that from their clinical mindset, there is nothing really different between surgically preparing a skin bed for a graft versus doing a debridement. If you look at your CCI Edit Policy Manual, here where it talks about debridement in the Chapter 3 section, it says debridement of a skin wound, and it gives the debridement codes, including those skin ones back in the 90,000 series. It says prior to a skin graft or substitute is included in the skin graft and shall not be separately reported. If the recipient site requires excision of open wounds, burn eschar, or scar or incisional release of scar contracture, CPT codes 15002 through 15005
5 may be separately reportable for certain types of skin grafts and skin substitutes. And it's kind of interesting because it does almost bundle these type of codes in almost so similar with these debridement codes. Like it's talking about debridements, and then it says, oh, well, if you're doing these site excision of the open wounds or the burn eschar prior to putting the graft on, which is kind of like a debridement, that you can separately report that.
So really, one of the key things you need to look into here, and I hate when things come down to semantics, but wording really is the key here, that it says that they're surgically preparing the wound bed for placement of that graft, and the fact that they are going to be placing a graft, like the next procedure they are going to be receiving on that area is the recipient, the placing of the graft. With all of our skin graft codes, everything goes by location and size. So for our skin preparation codes, they are by 100 square centimeters and then 100 square centimeters or part thereof, and they are based on, for infants and children, 1% of that body area. When we talk about square centimeters, this is how we calculate them. And I'm actually going to use inches real quick because I know a post-it note is 3 by 3 inches, so it just kind of makes for an easier example. So a post-it note is 3 inches long and 3 inches wide. So when we mark them all out, we've got our 3 inches here, our 3 inches here, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 square inches. What you do when you're calculating the total, we would take that 3 times 3, and that's how we would get the 9. So if you're working with a wound that is 3 centimeters by 10 centimeters, it would be 3 times 10, and that would be 30 centimeters for the total square centimeters. Now, if the provider documents 30 square centimeters, you don't have to calculate anything. That is the total. You don't take 30 times 30 or anything like that. That is the total. He's giving you the total square centimeters already. So you don't do any kind of additional math on this. This is the total, would be the 30 square centimeters. That little 2 there means it's squared already. You have to be so careful when you are coding for these skin graft procedures because they do not all follow the same pattern of locations or sizes, because certain locations are more sensitive, certain locations are smaller, certain locations, it's more intimate to put a graft in that area, and then there's certain types of grafts that are more complex to place and then are reimbursed at a different structure, a different centimeter type of structure, than certain types of grafts that might be easier to place or less complex or have less complications. So a split thickness skin graft of the trunk, arms, or legs goes by 100 square centimeters, whereas trunk, arms, and legs of an autograft goes by each 25 square centimeters. And speaking of trunk, arms, and legs, let's talk about location. When you are coding for skin grafts, the location that you're selecting in CPT is actually the location of the recipient site, not the location of the site where you're taking the graft off in those cases where you're doing an autograft, but it is the location of where you are placing it. So if it's ultimately going on the arm, you would code it to the arm, the CPT code for the arm. And when we're talking about that donor site, the closure of that donor site is included. So if they're doing a suturing or putting some kind of wound packing or something on there, that is included. The only time you can bill separately for a closure of a donor site is when you are doing any kind of graft or flap or something like that that's more extensive in order to bill it separately. Again, check those guidelines that are in there. It lays it all out for you.
Let's take a look at this case example. So we have a patient that comes in, open wound, left dorsolateral aspect of the foot. And it's saying the procedure performed was a surgical preparation of a wound bed for placement of a split thickness skin graft to the open wound from the left lateral thigh. Size of the graft is 5 by 5, so that's our graft size. So this procedure performed is always a good jumping off point, but make sure when you're coding for op reports, you always validate what's going on in the description of the procedure, because sometimes it's different, sometimes the methods change, and sometimes there are things that providers include in here that can be coded for that are not in this description of the procedure performed. So this patient was a Hispanic male who was involved in a motor vehicle accident and sustained an open wound on the dorsolateral aspect of the left foot. Patient also has a cuboid fracture. He is doing wet to dry dressing and has noted to have a 4 by 4 open wound. So that's the size of our wound. And remember, when we're coding, we code based off of wound size, not necessarily the graft size. Decision was made to proceed with a skin graft of that area. Patient was given a gram of Ansef in the pre-op area. Patient was brought to the operating room, placed in the supine position. Left lower extremity was then prepped and draped in regular sterile routine fashion. The open area, which was about 4 by 4 centimeters, was surgically prepared for receiving the skin graft. Look, that's our surgical prep code. So we did that 4 by 4. So let's take a look at that. Surgical prep 4 by 4. So I just want to quick do the math for you guys. So 4 by 4, our total square centimeters then would be 16 square centimeters. So keep that in mind. The edges were refreshed. The area was irrigated copiously with normal saline to begin preparing for the skin graft. We've got our prep here. We confirmed that this description that he gave up here saying he did that surgical prep. Yep, he did it down here. He described it. The lateral upper thigh was then cleaned with mineral oil. The dermatome was set up for 0.015 inches thick. About 5 by 5 cm split thickness skin graft was taken from the left upper thigh. Remember I said they take these a lot from the thigh. The graft was then fenestrated with the 15 blade. The graft was fit onto the open wound and was secured with 3/0 nylon. The adaptic was put over the graft and a ball of cotton moistened with normal saline was placed over the adaptic and was secured with the tail of the 3/0 nylon. Dressing was then applied over the 4 by 4 the cotton ball and the cerebral. For the donor site, it was dressed with epinephrine mixed with gauze. Now remember that donor site we don't code for unless we're doing something pretty extensive with that donor site. And in this case, they are just dressing it. So that's not something we separately bill for. The 4 by 4 ACE wrap was placed and the patient tolerated the procedure well and was taken to recovery in a stable condition. A disposable wound vac was placed on the foot. Ha 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 ha. So let's take a look. First we have our split thickness skin graft. That's the first thing we want to code for, split thickness skin graft. And then we have our surgical prep. And we also have this wound vac. We're going to take a look at the wound vac and see what we can do there. So if we look up our split thickness skin graft, remember we're doing 16 square centimeters here. So even though this is saying it was a 5 by 5, which I don't like that about, I don't like when they approximate, just, tell me what the size is. So 4 by 4 is 16. So when we look up in our CPT book what that code would be, the split thickness skin graft of our foot for that recipient area of the foot would be CPT code 15120. Our surgical preparation code for, again, the foot. So make sure you're being careful about that location because we have those separated, that the leg and the foot are two distinct different areas. So that code is 15004, and we actually also have a wound prep code 97607, but let's take a look at this. When we plug these into a CCI edit checker, so there's our wound vac, our surgical prep, and our split thickness skin graft, it actually tells us there that that wound vac is included, that 97605 is a column 2 code. It's included in that graft. This is in a separate site. It is in a separate area. It is in a separate encounter. There's nothing that was separated. And although I can't find any specific guidance in the CCI edit policy manual, saying this is when you could unbundle this, I'm gonna err on the side of caution because I know, like my basics of 59 modifiers, in order to unbundle this, that it's not anything separate. Like this is considered to be included when you are placing this graft. That it's normally understood that you're going to put a wound vac on it, and that would be included. So in this case, we're going to go back and we're going to say, okay, so we're going to take off that wound vac code. That's not billable, so we're just going to bill for our split thickness skin graft and our surgical preparation code. And then, of course, we can't forget our ICD-10 code. So we have here S91.302, 2 for the left, and then A for that initial encounter. It's being actively treated, so it would be an A for the active treatment.
So I hope this video helped you out with some of those questions on skin graft coding. If it did, make sure you give this video a big thumbs up. And if you have any specific questions on skin grafts, leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so that you never miss another episode. I will see you in the next episode, and until then, you just keep on coding on.